The fact remains that meaning and its perception, as seen from the logotherapeutic angle, is completely down to earth rather than afloat in the air or resident in an ivory tower. Sweepingly, I would locate the cognition of meaning, of a personal meaning of a concrete situation, midway between an aha experience along the lines of Carl Buehler's concept and a Gestalt perception, say along the lines of Max Wertheimer's theory. The perception of meaning differs from the classical concept of Gestalt perception insofar as the latter implies the sudden awareness of a figure on a ground, whereas the perception of meaning as I see it more specifically boils down to becoming aware of a possibility against the background of reality, or to express it in plain words, to becoming aware of what can be done about a given situation. And how does a human being go about finding meaning? As Charlotte Buehler has stated, all we can do is study the lives of people who seem to have found their answers to the questions of what ultimately human life is about, as against those who have not. Basic Theoretical Concepts of Humanistic Psychology, American Psychologist, 26, April 1971, page 378. In addition to such a biographical approach, however, we may as well embark on a biological approach. Logotherapy conceives of conscience as a prompter which, if need be, indicates the direction in which we have to move in a given life situation. In order to carry out such a task, conscience must apply a measuring stick to the situation one is confronted with, and this situation has to be evaluated in the light of a set of criteria, in the light of a hierarchy of values. These values, however, cannot be espoused and adopted by us on a conscious level. They are something that we are. They have crystallized in the course of the evolution of our species. They are founded on our biological past and are rooted in our biological depth. Konrad Lorenz might have had something similar in mind when he developed the concept of a biological a priori, and when both of us recently discussed my own view on the biological foundation of the valuing process, he enthusiastically expressed his accord. In any case, if a pre-reflective axiological self-understanding exists, we may assume that it is ultimately anchored in our biological heritage. As logotherapy teaches, there are three main avenues on which one arrives at meaning in life. The first is by creating a work or by doing a deed. The second is by experiencing something or encountering someone. In other words, meaning can be found not only in work, but also in love. Edith Weisskopf-Joelson observed in this context that the logotherapeutic notion that experiencing can be as valuable as achieving is therapeutic because it compensates for our one-sided emphasis on the external world of achievement at the expense of the internal world of experience. The Place of Logotherapy in the World Today, the International Forum for Logotherapy, Volume 1, Number 3, 1980, pages 3 to 7. Most important, however, is the third avenue to meaning in life. Even the helpless victim of a hopeless situation, facing a fate he cannot change, may rise above himself, may grow beyond himself, and by so doing, change himself. He may turn a personal tragedy into a triumph. Again, it was Edith Weisskopf-Joelson who, as mentioned on page 136, once expressed a hope that logotherapy may help counteract certain unhealthy trends in the present-day culture of the United States, where the incurable sufferer is given very little opportunity to be proud of his suffering and to consider it ennobling rather than degrading, so that he is not only unhappy, but also ashamed of being unhappy. For a quarter of a century I ran the neurological department of a general hospital, and bore witness to my patients' capacity to turn their predicaments into human achievements. In addition to such practical experience, empirical evidence is also available which supports the possibility that one may find meaning in suffering. Researchers at the Yale University School of Medicine have been impressed by the number of prisoners of war of the Vietnam War who explicitly claimed that although their captivity was extraordinarily stressful, filled with torture, disease, malnutrition, and solitary confinement, they nevertheless benefited from the captivity experience, seeing it as a growth experience. W. H. Sledge, J. A. Boydston, and A. J. Rabe, Self-Concept Changes Related to War Captivity, Archive of General Psychiatry, 37, 1980, pages 430 to 443. But the most powerful arguments in favor of a tragic optimism are those which in Latin are called argumenta ad hominem. Jerry Long, to cite an example, is a living testimony to the defiant power of the human spirit, as it is called in logotherapy. Footnote: The Defiant Power of the Human Spirit was in fact the title of a paper presented by Long at the Third World Congress of Logotherapy in June 1983. To quote the Texarkana Gazette, Jerry Long has been paralyzed from his neck down since a diving accident which rendered him a quadriplegic 3 years ago. He was 17 when the accident occurred. Today, Long can use his mouth stick to type. He attends 2 courses at community college via a special telephone. The intercom allows Long to both hear and participate in class discussions. He also occupies his time by reading, watching television, and writing. And in a letter I received from him, he writes, "I view my life as being abundant with meaning and purpose. The attitude that I adopted on that fateful day has become my personal credo for life. I broke my neck. It didn't break me. I am currently enrolled in my first psychology course in college. I believe that my handicap will only enhance my ability to help others. I know that without the suffering, the growth that I have achieved would have been impossible." Is this to say that suffering is indispensable to the discovery of meaning? In no way. I only insist that meaning is available in spite of, nay, even through, suffering, provided, as noted in Part 2 of this book, that the suffering is unavoidable. If it is avoidable, the meaningful thing to do is to remove its cause, for unnecessary suffering is masochistic rather than heroic. If, on the other hand, one cannot change a situation that causes his suffering, he can still choose his attitude. Footnote: I won't forget an interview I once heard on Austrian TV, given by a Polish cardiologist who, during World War II, had helped organize the Warsaw Ghetto upheaval. "What a heroic deed!" exclaimed the reporter. "Listen," calmly replied the doctor, "to take a gun and shoot is no great thing. But if the SS leads you to a gas chamber or to a mass grave to execute you on the spot, and you can't do anything about it, except for going your way with dignity, you see, this is what I would call heroism. Attitudinal heroism, so to speak." Long had not been chosen to break his neck, but he did decide not to let himself be broken by what had happened to him. As we see, the priority stays with creatively changing the situation that causes us to suffer, but the superiority goes to the know how to suffer, if need be. And there is empirical evidence that, literally, the man in the street is of the same opinion. Austrian public opinion pollsters recently reported that those held in highest esteem by most of the people interviewed are neither the great artists nor the great scientists, neither the great statesmen nor the great sports figures, but those who master a hard lot with their heads held high. In turning to the second aspect of the tragic triad, namely guilt, I would like to depart from a theological concept that has always been fascinating to me. I refer to what is called mysterium iniquitatis, meaning, as I see it, that a crime in the final analysis remains inexplicable inasmuch as it cannot be fully traced back to biological, psychological, and/or sociological factors. Totally explaining one's crime would be tantamount to explaining away his or her guilt, and to seeing in him or her not a free and responsible human being, but a machine to be repaired. Even criminals themselves abhor this treatment, and prefer to be held responsible for their deeds. From a convict serving his sentence in an Illinois penitentiary, I received a letter in which he deplored that the criminal never has a chance to explain himself. He is offered a variety of excuses to choose from. Society is blamed, and in many instances the blame is put on the victim. Furthermore, when I addressed the prisoners in San Quentin, I told them that you are human beings like me, and as such you were free to commit a crime, to become guilty. Now, however, you are responsible for overcoming guilt by rising above it, by growing beyond yourselves, by changing for the better. They felt understood. Footnote: see also Joseph B. Fabry, The Pursuit of Meaning, New York, Harper & Row, 1980. And from Frank E. W., an ex-prisoner, I received a note which stated that he had started a logotherapy group for ex-felons. We are 27 strong, and the newer ones are staying out of prison through the pure strength of those of us from the original group. Only one returned, and he is now free. Footnote: C.F. Victor E. Frankl, The Unheard Cry for Meaning, New York, Simon & Schuster, 1978, pages 42 to 43. As for the concept of collective guilt, I personally think that it is totally unjustified to hold one person responsible for the behavior of another person, or a collective of persons. Since the end of World War II, I have not become weary of publicly arguing against the collective guilt concept. Footnote, see also Viktor E. Frankl, Psychotherapy and Existentialism, New York, Simon & Schuster, 1967. Sometimes, however, it takes a lot of didactic tricks to detach people from their superstitions. An American woman once confronted me with the reproach, "How can you still write some of your books in German, Adolf Hitler's language?" In response, I asked her if she had knives in her kitchen, and when she answered that she did, I acted dismayed and shocked, exclaiming, "How can you still use knives after so many killers have used them to stab and murder their victims?" She stopped objecting to my writing books in German. The third aspect of the tragic triad concerns death, but it concerns life as well, for at any time each of the moments of which life consists is dying, and that moment will never recur. And yet is not this transitoriness a reminder that challenges us to make the best possible use of each moment of our lives? It certainly is, and hence my imperative, live as if you were living for the second time, and had acted as wrongly the first time as you are about to act now. In fact, the opportunities to act properly, the potentialities to fulfill a meaning, are affected by the irreversibility of our lives. But also the potentialities alone are so affected. For as soon as we have used an opportunity and have actualized a potential meaning, we have done so once and for all. We have rescued it into the past, wherein it has been safely delivered and deposited. In the past, nothing is irretrievably lost, but rather, on the contrary, everything is irrevocably stored and treasured. To be sure, people tend to see only the stubble fields of transitoriness, but overlook and forget the full granaries of the past into which they have brought the harvest of their lives. The deeds done, the loves loved, and last but not least, the sufferings they have gone through with courage and dignity. From this one may see that there is no reason to pity old people. Instead, young people should envy them. It is true that the old have no opportunities, no possibilities in the future, but they have more than that. Instead of possibilities in the future, they have realities in the past, the potentialities they have actualized, the meanings they have fulfilled, the values they have realized. And nothing and nobody can ever remove these assets from the past.